My beloved child, God says. Don't scroll. If this message found you today, it wasn't an accident. Stay until the end because there is something you need to understand about the connection you have been feeling in your heart. Something happened behind the scenes that you were never supposed to know about, and the person you love may have been placed in the middle of a situation they never asked for. Their mother became deeply concerned about the connection between you and them. She saw something changing in them. She noticed that they were thinking differently, acting differently, becoming quieter, and carrying an emotion they could no longer hide. And instead of asking them what was happening, she decided to find another way to understand it. She reached out to someone she believed could reveal what was happening beneath the surface. A psychic was contacted, and the purpose of that meeting was not simply to understand the connection. The intention was to find a way to break it. Yes, my beloved child, someone wanted the connection between you and your soulmate to disappear before it could become something permanent. They believed that if they could discover why your person was so emotionally attached to you, they could somehow remove your influence from their life. But what happened during that conversation was completely different from what they expected. The psychic listened carefully as the mother explained everything she had noticed. She talked about the changes in her child. She talked about the distance, the silence, the late-night phone checking, the sudden emotional reactions whenever your name appeared, and the way her child seemed unable to completely move forward. The mother believed there had to be something wrong. She wanted an explanation. She wanted someone to tell her that this connection was temporary and could be broken. But then the psychic asked one question that changed the entire atmosphere in the room. She asked, "What happens when your child tries to forget this person?" And the mother became silent, because she already knew the answer. Every time your soulmate tried to push you out of their mind, something pulled them back toward you. Every time they decided they were finished, memories returned. Every time they tried to convince themselves that another path would be easier, their heart became heavier. They could stay busy. They could talk to other people. They could pretend everything was normal. But they could not completely silence what they felt for you. And that was the first thing the psychic noticed. She realized this was not simply a passing attraction. There was an emotional attachment that had survived distance, silence, misunderstandings, and even attempts to move on. The mother wanted the psychic to tell her how to break that attachment. Instead, the psychic reportedly said something that nobody in that room expected. She said, "You may be trying to separate two people who are already connected in a way you do not understand." The room went completely quiet. The mother did not know what to say. She had expected instructions. She had expected a solution. She had expected someone to confirm her fears and give her control over the situation. But instead, she heard something that challenged everything she believed. The psychic began asking about the history between you and your soulmate. She wanted to know when you met, what changed afterward, why the relationship became complicated, and why your soulmate had never completely forgotten you. And as the story unfolded, the psychic became even more serious. She realized that your soulmate had been fighting an internal battle for a long time. Part of them wanted to obey the expectations of the people around them. Part of them wanted peace. Part of them wanted to choose the easier road. But another part of them kept returning to you. That hidden part was the part they had been trying to understand themselves. And then something even more unexpected happened. The psychic asked your soulmate's mother to describe you without using your name. She wanted to know what kind of person you were, what your presence had changed, and why her child could not simply replace the connection with someone else. The mother struggled to answer. She could describe your personality. She could describe what she had observed. But she could not explain why your soulmate seemed different after meeting you. That was the mystery. You were not simply another person in their life. You had awakened emotions they had buried for years. You had made them question choices they once accepted without thinking. You had made them look at their future differently. And even when you were not physically present, the memory of you remained. My beloved child, this is where you need to pay attention. Because the most important part of this story is not what the mother wanted. It is what your soulmate eventually realized. They realized that other people could have opinions about their life, but nobody could completely control their heart. They began to understand that keeping everyone else happy while betraying their own emotions was creating a pain they could no longer ignore. They may not have told you this. They may still be silent. They may still appear confused. They may even act as though they have moved on. But silence does not always mean absence of feeling. Sometimes silence is where the greatest emotional battle is happening. And while the mother believed the psychic would help her separate you, the conversation exposed something completely different. It exposed how deeply your soulmate had been affected by you. Then came the moment that reportedly silenced everyone in the room. The psychic looked at the mother and said that forcing a separation would not solve the problem. Because if someone leaves a person physically while their heart remains connected, the distance only creates more questions. The mother asked what she should do. The psychic did not immediately answer. Instead, she asked a much harder question: what if your child is not unhappy because of this person? What if they are unhappy because they have been denying what they truly feel? That question hit differently. Because suddenly the mother had to consider something she had never wanted to consider. What if you were not the problem? What if the problem was fear? What if the problem was pressure? What if the problem was other People's expectations? What if the person she wanted her child to forget was actually the person who made them feel understood? My beloved child, sometimes people try to destroy what they do not understand. Sometimes they see a connection and judge it from the outside, without knowing the private moments, the emotions, the memories, and the spiritual lessons hidden inside it. Your soulmate may have been placed under pressure to choose what looked safe instead of what felt meaningful. And perhaps that is why things became so complicated. But there is something else you need to know. The psychic did not reveal the future in the way the mother expected. Instead, she revealed the truth about the present. She said that your soulmate was emotionally conflicted. They were trying to satisfy everyone while carrying feelings they could not simply switch off. And that conflict was beginning to exhaust them. They wanted peace, but pretending not to care about you was not giving them peace. They wanted certainty, but every attempt to suppress the connection created more uncertainty. They wanted to move forward, but some part of them kept asking, what if I am walking away from the person I was meant to understand? That question followed them everywhere. It appeared during quiet nights. It appeared when they heard certain songs. It appeared when they saw places connected to memories of you. It appeared when someone mentioned relationships. And most importantly, it appeared whenever they imagined their future. They could picture many possibilities, but somehow your presence kept appearing in the background of those possibilities. That frightened them. It also revealed something they had been refusing to admit. You had become emotionally significant to them. And the more people tried to convince them to forget you, the more they started questioning why everyone was so determined to make that happen. Then your soulmate began noticing the difference between advice and pressure. Advice gives you freedom. Pressure makes you afraid of choosing for yourself. And slowly, they began recognizing which one they had been receiving. They started asking themselves why. They were being told who they should love, who they should avoid, and what kind of future they were supposed to build. This was the beginning of an internal awakening. They did not necessarily make a dramatic announcement. They did not suddenly reveal everything. But something shifted inside them. They stopped accepting every opinion as truth. They began listening to their own heart. And that is where the entire situation began changing. My beloved child, if you have been wondering why the connection has felt strangely intense lately, why you have been remembering them more often, or why your emotions seem to rise suddenly without explanation, take this message as a moment to pause rather than panic. Do not chase. Do not force. Do not beg someone to choose you. If this connection is real and meaningful, it does not need desperation to survive. Let people reveal themselves through their actions. Let truth come to the surface naturally. Because the greatest revelation from this story is not that someone tried to interfere. It is that interference exposed how powerful the unresolved emotions really were. Your soulmate was forced to confront something they had been avoiding. And once a person finally sees their own truth, it becomes much harder to pretend they do not see it. The mother may have entered that room believing she could find a way to break the connection. But she left with a completely different realization. You cannot force someone to forget what their heart continues to remember. You cannot erase memories by demanding they disappear. You cannot control another person's emotional truth. And you cannot build a peaceful future by forcing someone to live against their own heart. That night may have been uncomfortable, confusing, and emotional, but it may also have become the beginning of a major realization for your soulmate. They started understanding that the choice about their future would eventually have to belong to them. Not their family. Not friends. Not fear. Not pressure. Them. And my beloved child, this is why you should not lose hope simply because you cannot see what is happening behind the scenes. You only see the silence. You do not see every conversation. You do not see every memory. You do not see every internal battle. You do not see the moments when your name crosses their mind and they quietly wonder whether they made the wrong decision by walking away. There may be much more happening beneath the surface than you realize. But remember this, your value does not depend on whether someone chooses you today. Your worth existed before they met you, and it will remain whether they return tomorrow or take longer to understand what they feel. Do not allow someone else's interference to make you question your own value. Do not allow silence to convince you that you were forgotten. And do not allow fear to make decisions that belong to your future. If this connection is meant to be restored, let it return through honesty, maturity, and genuine choice. Let your soulmate come toward you because they finally understand what they want, not because someone forced them. And if they return, let their actions speak louder than promises. Because after everything that happened, one truth has become impossible to ignore: the attempt to break the connection may have done the opposite. It may have forced your soulmate to finally look directly at the feelings they had been running from. And now, the question is no longer whether they can forget you. The question is whether they are finally brave enough to admit why they never could. Stay with this message, because the next revelation is even deeper. There is something your soulmate has not told you about the moment they realized they could lose you forever, and that realization changed the way they looked at your entire connection. My beloved child, God says, there is something deeper you need to understand, because the moment your soulmate realized they could actually lose you was not a small emotional moment. It became a turning point they could not easily forget. For a long time, they had convinced themselves that they had time. They thought they could stay silent a little longer, figure things out later, make everyone around them happy first, and eventually deal with what was happening inside their heart. But something changed when they realized that you might not wait forever. Suddenly, the possibility of you moving forward without them became real. And that thought hurt them more than they expected. They had been so focused on avoiding conflict that they never stopped to consider what their silence was costing them. They believed you would always be there emotionally, even if you were physically distant. But then they began wondering, what if one day they stop caring? What if they finally decide they deserve someone who chooses them without hesitation? That question stayed with them. It followed them into quiet moments. It came back when they were alone. And every time it returned, they felt something they had been trying desperately to suppress. Regret. My beloved child, your soulmate may have made mistakes. They may have listened to the wrong people. They may have allowed fear, family pressure, pride, or confusion to influence decisions that should have come from their own heart. But mistakes do not automatically erase feelings. Sometimes mistakes make people understand those feelings more clearly. And that is exactly what began happening. They started looking back at the moments they had with you differently. Things they once considered ordinary suddenly felt precious. A conversation they barely remembered became something they replayed. A small gesture from you became something they wished they could experience again. Even the moments when you were simply present began carrying a different meaning. They realized that what they had taken for granted might have been the very thing they were now missing. And then came another painful realization. They began to understand that the people who had encouraged distance from you would not be the ones living with the consequences of that decision. They would. Their heart would. Their future would. And that realization created a quiet resistance inside them. They stopped arguing with everyone. Instead, they started observing. They listened carefully to what people said about you. They noticed when someone tried to make them doubt you. They noticed when your name came up and the conversation suddenly became uncomfortable. They noticed how certain people reacted whenever they mentioned you. And slowly, they began asking themselves why there was so much fear surrounding a connection that supposedly meant nothing. If you were truly irrelevant, why was everyone so determined to make them forget you? That question became impossible to ignore. The psychic conversation had planted a seed, but your soulmate's own experiences began watering it. They started thinking independently. They started remembering how they felt before other people became involved. They remembered who they were when they could talk to you without worrying about anyone else's opinion. And somewhere deep inside, they missed that version of themselves. They missed the freedom they felt when they could simply be honest with you. They missed the way you made them feel understood without demanding that they explain every emotion. They missed the sense that someone could see the parts of them they normally kept hidden. And that is why forgetting you became harder. It was not only about missing a person. It was about missing the version of themselves they experienced around you. My beloved child, there is a reason your soulmate may have seemed inconsistent. One day they could appear close, and the next day they could become distant. One moment they might seem ready to communicate, and then suddenly disappear again. This was not necessarily because their feelings changed every day. Sometimes their courage changed every day. When they felt brave, they wanted to come closer. When fear returned, they pulled away. When they imagined choosing you, their heart felt lighter. When they imagined the consequences of choosing you, anxiety returned. They were caught between desire and fear, between their own heart and the expectations surrounding them. But now something is changing. They are beginning to understand that avoiding a decision is still a decision. Staying silent is still communicating something. And walking away without explaining can create wounds that become harder to heal later. They are beginning to realize that if they truly want peace, they cannot keep living between two worlds. They cannot keep allowing other people to make emotional decisions for them. And they cannot expect you to remain frozen in the same place while they figure themselves out. This is where your energy matters most, not by chasing them, but by refusing to abandon yourself. Do not spend every hour wondering what they are doing. Do not constantly search for signs. Do not allow uncertainty to consume your peace. Your soulmate has their own journey, and your responsibility is to protect your heart while that journey unfolds. If they are meant to return, let them return with clarity. Let them return with courage. Let them return ready to communicate honestly instead of repeating the same cycle. Because you deserve more than secret feelings. You deserve truth. You deserve consistency. You deserve someone who does not need a room full of people to decide whether you matter. And perhaps this is exactly what your soulmate is beginning to understand. They are starting to realize that loving someone privately while allowing the world to control the relationship is not enough. They may have thought that protecting everyone else's feelings was the mature thing to do. But now they are seeing the hidden cost. Every time they denied their feelings, they were not eliminating them. They were simply pushing the pain into another place. Every time they pretended you did not matter, they were creating another layer of regret. Every time they listened to someone else's opinion instead of their own heart, they moved further away from the person they wanted to become. And then one night, when everything became quiet, they found themselves thinking about one simple question: what would happen if I never got another chance? That question shook them. Because suddenly the future was not guaranteed. You could meet someone else. You could heal. You could stop waiting. You could decide that your life must continue whether they return or not. And for the first time, your soulmate understood that they could not assume you would always be available. They realized that your silence might not mean you were waiting. Your silence might mean you were healing. And that realization changed something inside them. They started wanting to know whether you were okay. They wondered whether you still thought about them. They wondered whether you had forgiven them. They wondered whether there was still a door open somewhere inside your heart. But they were afraid to ask. Because asking would require honesty. And honesty would require them to admit that they still cared. This is why they may be watching from a distance, checking indirectly, or waiting for what they believe is the perfect moment. But my beloved child, there is no perfect moment when a person is afraid. There is only the moment when fear becomes more painful than silence. And your soulmate is getting closer to that moment. The pressure they once felt from others is beginning to compete with something stronger, the realization that their own happiness is also their responsibility. Their mother may have wanted to protect them. Others may have believed they knew what was best. But your soulmate is slowly understanding that nobody else has to live inside their heart. Nobody else feels their loneliness at night. Nobody else carries their regrets. Nobody else knows what they feel when your memory returns. And because of that, the final choice must eventually be theirs. Now listen carefully, because there is another part of the story you should not overlook. The psychic's words did not only affect the mother. They also created uncertainty in the family. The mother began wondering whether her attempt to control the situation had actually made it worse. She began noticing that the more she pushed, the more distant her child became. The more she criticized the connection, the more determined they seemed to become internally. She had wanted obedience. Instead, she created questions. And sometimes questions are more powerful than commands. Once someone starts questioning what they have been told, they cannot easily return to their old way of thinking. Your soulmate began questioning everything. Why was their happiness being treated as a threat? Why was your connection considered dangerous? Why did they feel more emotionally alive when they were honest about you? Why did forgetting you feel like losing a part of themselves? And most importantly, why were they afraid to choose what they truly wanted? The answers did not come all at once. They came through memories, through dreams, through quiet moments, through unexpected reminders, through the realization that time was moving forward whether they were ready or not. And slowly, the fear of losing you became greater than the fear of disappointing everyone else. My beloved child, this does not mean you should sit and wait endlessly. It means you should allow truth to reveal itself. Keep living. Keep growing. Keep becoming the person you are meant to become. Do not put your entire future on pause for someone who has not yet found the courage to step forward. If your soulmate returns, let them meet a stronger version of you. Let them see that you did not allow pain to destroy your heart. Let them understand that your love was never about possession. It was about connection, respect, honesty, and choice. And if they finally choose you, let that choice be intentional. Let it be spoken clearly. Let it be supported by action. Because after everything that has happened, words alone will not be enough. They will need to show you that they understand what they almost lost. They will need to show you that they are willing to protect the connection instead of hiding it. They will need to show you that outside pressure will no longer control every decision they make. And perhaps that is the lesson this entire situation was meant to reveal. Sometimes a connection has to pass through confusion before both people understand its value. Sometimes distance forces people to recognize what closeness allowed them to take for granted. Sometimes interference reveals what cannot be easily erased. And sometimes the person who tried to separate two hearts accidentally exposes how deeply those hearts were connected. My beloved child, do not be afraid of what you cannot see. You do not need to fight anyone. You do not need to prove yourself to their family. You do not need to compete with another person. You do not need to convince your soulmate that you are worthy. Your worth is not a competition. The right person will eventually recognize it through their own clarity. And right now, something inside your soulmate is becoming clearer. They are beginning to understand that the person they were encouraged to forget is the person they never truly forgot. The connection they were told to abandon is the connection that keeps returning to their thoughts. And the future they were told to accept without questioning may no longer feel like their own. But there is one final revelation you need to hear. Your soulmate has been carrying a fear that they have never told you. They are afraid that even if they return, you may no longer want them. They are afraid that the damage caused by silence, distance, and outside interference may have changed your heart. They wonder whether you would believe them if they finally told you the truth. They wonder whether you would forgive them. They wonder whether you would still recognize the person they have become. And that fear is one of the biggest reasons they have not moved faster. They are not only afraid of rejection. They are afraid of facing the consequences of everything they allowed to happen. But soon, they may have to face that fear. Because a heart can only hide for so long before truth demands to be heard. And when that moment comes, remember what I told you. Do not chase the confession. Let it come. Do not force the conversation. Let them initiate it with courage. Do not settle for half-truths. Ask for clarity. And if they truly mean what they say, their actions will confirm their words. My beloved child, the story is not ending where someone tried to break the connection. That may have been the moment the truth finally began to surface. The person who wanted Separation may have accidentally triggered self-awareness. The psychic may have revealed something nobody expected. And your soulmate may now be standing at the edge of a decision they cannot avoid forever. One path keeps everyone else comfortable but leaves their heart questioning. The other path requires courage, honesty, and responsibility. And they know exactly which path leads toward the truth. They are simply gathering the courage to walk it. So, breathe. Release the fear. Release the need to control the timing. What is meant to become clear will become clear. And if a conversation comes, listen carefully, not only to what your soulmate says, but to what they are finally willing to do. Because the greatest proof of love will not be another promise. It will be a decision. And the decision they are preparing to make could change everything you thought you knew about this connection.